I never imagined I would ever feel the way I did that night, shaking, flushed, my breath catching in my throat as his hands moved across skin that had forgotten how to be touched. I was a married woman, a mother, someone who was supposed to have her life figured out. And yet, there I was, backed against a wall in my own kitchen, fingers tangled in his shirt, lips brushing the edge of a line I knew I could never uncross. He wasn't a stranger. That would have made it easier to hate myself afterward. He was someone I trusted, someone I was never supposed to see that way. And the worst part? I liked it. I wanted it. God, what does that say about me? I still remember the way his breath felt on my neck, how alive I felt for the first time in years. This is my story, my shame, my secret. I'm 31 years old, married for 8 years. No kids, though we tried. My husband, Mark, is the kind of man people look at and say, "You're so lucky." And maybe I am. He's kind, dependable, stable. The sort of man who always remembers to put gas in my car, who folds laundry without being asked, who never raises his voice. But I don't feel lucky. Not anymore. At some point, I stopped feeling seen. We went from passionate kisses in the hallway to pecks on the cheek before work. From falling asleep naked and tangled in each other's arms to rolling over with a mumbled goodnight. I can't remember the last time he looked at me like he wanted to devour me. Now it's just routine. Gentle, predictable, dutiful. Lovemaking that feels more like obligation than desire. I used to think it was me. That maybe I was asking for too much. That this was just what marriage becomes. Comfort without fire. But deep down, I ache for something more. Not just sex. Longing. That breathless, desperate pull of connection I used to believe only existed in movies. I crave to be wanted. To be undone. I dress up sometimes, hoping he'll notice. He doesn't. I drop hints, touch his arm, even try to initiate things, but his tiredness always wins. Long day at work, he'll mutter, rolling, over. And I lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I can keep living like this without screaming. I've thought about therapy, about telling him how lonely I feel. But every time I try, the words dissolve before they reach my lips. He's a good man. He provides. He cares. Who am I to complain? Who am I to say I'm dying inside when he's doing everything right? But still, there's this quiet voice inside me, whispering truths I don't want to admit. I want more. I need more. I want to feel alive again. And then, someone came along. Someone I should have never looked at twice. But I did. And everything I thought I knew about myself unraveled. It started with a knock on the door. I was in the kitchen, still in my robe, sipping coffee that had gone cold, when I heard it. 3 firm knocks, familiar somehow. When I opened the door, my breath caught. "Hey, kiddo." My heart dropped into my stomach. It was Aaron, my dad's best friend. My godfather, technically. I hadn't seen him in almost 5 years, not since the funeral. Tall, rugged, with that weathered face and steel gray hair that had only made him more compelling. He was older, obviously, but not in a way that felt off. If anything, the years had settled into him like he was made for time. "Aaron?" I blinked, gripping the door tighter than I needed to. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, easy and warm. "In town for work. Thought I'd drop by. Your mom said you were nearby now." I invited him in. I didn't even think about it. He looked around our modest home, nodding with approval, then followed me into the kitchen. We caught up like old friends. He asked about Mark, work, life. He talked about his travels, the way he'd never settled down. His voice was low, rough, filled with a kind of casual confidence that made the air feel warmer. That first visit lasted hours. Something inside me lit up just listening to him talk. He looked at me, not through me like Mark did, but at me, like I was still someone worth seeing. Over the next few weeks, he came by again, always unannounced, always with some casual excuse. Was in the neighborhood, wanted to drop this off. Brought you that book you mentioned. And I let him in. Every time. I told myself it was harmless. He was like family. But every time he stood close, something happened in me. A flicker, a flush, a need I hadn't felt in so long it scared me. When our fingers brushed, passing a glass of wine, handing over a napkin, I would feel that heat crawl up my spine. He never did anything inappropriate, never crossed a line. But his eyes lingered. His voice dropped when we were alone. He would sit just a little too close on the couch, and I didn't move away. One night, Mark was working late. Aaron and I were in the kitchen again, drinking wine, laughing over some story from my childhood. He reached across to brush a hair from my face, an innocent gesture. But the way his fingers lingered on my cheek made my breath hitch. "You've grown up?" he said quietly. His eyes met mine, intense and unreadable. I laughed nervously. "Well, it's been a while." He didn't smile. "No, I mean, you're beautiful, strong. There's something in you now. Something I can't stop noticing." The air between us thickened. I looked down, heart pounding, lips parted but silent. I should have stopped him. I should have said something. But instead I sat there, my face burning, wanting him to say more. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Mark, staring at the ceiling, feeling Aaron's voice in my ears, his fingers on my skin. I tried to shake it, to push it down, but the fantasy bloomed like wildfire. And it wasn't just sex I craved. It was the attention, the way Aaron made me feel visible, magnetic, alive. With him, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was a woman again. Our conversations deepened after that. He asked questions Mark never did. About my dreams, regrets, fears. He listened, really listened, like my words mattered. He made me laugh so hard I'd forget how hollow I'd felt just hours before. And still, he didn't touch me. Not really, but the tension was unbearable. The kind that simmers just under the surface, where every moment feels like the edge of something dangerous. Where your body knows before your mind does that you're already too far gone. I started dressing differently when I knew he might drop by. A little lipstick, a tighter blouse. I told myself it was just confidence, but I knew what I was doing. And still, we danced around it. The unspoken pull. The heat in a look held too long. One afternoon, as he stood in the doorway ready to leave, he looked at me with something burning behind his eyes. He didn't speak, just stepped close, so close I could smell the cedar on his skin, feel the warmth of his body. "I should go," he murmured. "You should," I whispered back. But neither of us moved. I felt his hand graze mine, just a brush, and it felt like lightning. My knees almost gave out from the sheer intensity of it. And then he left, the door clicking softly behind him. I stood there, heart racing, lips tingling, my entire body trembling with want. And I knew. This wasn't just a flirtation. It was a fuse, and we were seconds from detonation. It was raining the night it happened. Mark had gone out of town for a work retreat, one of those weekend conferences full of networking mixers and motivational speeches. He kissed me goodbye that morning, his lips barely grazing mine, his mind already miles away. I watched him drive off, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. I should have been used to it by now. But something about that weekend felt different. Maybe it was how quiet the house was. Maybe it was the storm pressing against the windows, the way the air felt electric. Or maybe it was because I knew Aaron was coming. He texted earlier that day. "Passing through later, thought I'd check on you, make sure you're not floating away in the storm." I should have said no. I typed out the words, deleted them, typed them again. Instead, I answered, "Doors open." When he arrived, I was barefoot, wrapped in a soft cardigan, hair damp from a quick shower. He stepped in, shaking the rain, off his jacket, and looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. And just like that, the space between us was charged again. We drank wine by the fireplace, sitting on the floor, knees nearly touching. I felt his gaze lingering on the curve of my neck, the way my cardigan slipped slightly off one shoulder. I didn't pull it back up. His voice was low, warm, full of questions I hadn't been asked in years. At one point, I said something. I don't even remember what. And he laughed. Then suddenly, his hand was on mine. Just resting there. And I didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. His thumb brushed slowly across my knuckles, and my breath hitched. The sound of rain against the windows filled the silence. I don't want to pretend anymore, he said, barely above a whisper. Neither did I. I don't remember who leaned in first. Only the moment our lips met. Soft at first, then searching. My heart thudded against my ribs as if trying to break free. His hands moved gently, like he was afraid I'd shatter, but I didn't feel fragile. I felt awake. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulled him closer, and tasted the rain on his skin. Every nerve in my body ignited, sparking in places I'd long forgotten. When his mouth moved to my neck, my cardigan slipped from my shoulders entirely, and I didn't stop. Him. I didn't want to. His hands were careful, reverent, like he was memorizing the shape of me. My skin buzzed beneath his touch. When he whispered my name, it didn't sound like a question. It sounded like worship. And all the while, somewhere in the back of my mind, guilt stirred. Mark. But it felt so far away, like a fading echo. Because here, I was wanted. Desired. Adored in a way that left me trembling. We moved to the couch. The fire cast golden light across his face as he looked down at me, eyes asking for permission, for certainty. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. I was already gone. What followed wasn't rushed or wild. It was slow, deliberate. Each touch a confession. I felt his breath against my ear, his hands in my hair, and something inside me cracked open. I gasped, clinging to him, not just from pleasure, but from the sheer emotion flooding my chest. I felt known in a way I hadn't in years. Not just my body, but me. Afterward, we stayed tangled together, wrapped in silence and soft blankets. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heart. Neither of us said what we both knew. This wasn't just lust. This wasn't a fling. This was a line we couldn't uncross. The guilt came later, slowly at first, a creeping unease. I watched the fire die down and my stomach turned. My hands, still warm from his touch, now felt foreign. What had I done? I stood, suddenly chilled, pulling my cardigan around me. Aaron sat up, his face shadowed, watching me like he was already bracing for regret. I should go, he said. I didn't stop him. When he left, the silence was unbearable. I sat in the middle of the room, the scent of him still on my skin, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Part of me wanted to cry, part of me wanted to scream. But mostly, I just sat there, empty, full, broken, alive, all at once. Because it had been real. The way he looked at me, the way he held me like I was something sacred. It wasn't just about sex. It was about being seen, touched in a way that said, you still matter. And as wrong as it was, I didn't regret it. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was cold. Still. And I lay there on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket he and I had shared just hours earlier, trying to make sense of what I'd done. My skin still hummed where he'd touched me. My lips felt bruised. My heart. It was quieter than I expected. Not racing, not panicked, just heavy. Sore. I thought I would feel disgusted with myself, that I'd wake up choking on guilt. But instead, I felt numb. Not empty. Just muted, like the colors in the room had, all faded to grayscale. I made coffee in silence, every movement deliberate. My hands trembled slightly when I reached for the mug. I kept expecting to break down, to fall to the floor in tears, to call someone, anyone, and scream, "What have I done?" But I didn't. I sipped the coffee. I cleaned up the living room. I folded the blanket and put it away. I functioned. That scared me more than anything. By the time Mark returned Sunday night, the storm had passed, and I had washed the sheets. I'd even made his favorite dinner, as if I were playing the role of the perfect wife in a film I no longer believed in. He walked in tired, kissed my cheek, and smiled. "Smells amazing," he said, dropping his suitcase by the door. I smiled back, or at least I moved my mouth in a way that felt like smiling. At dinner, I listened to him talk about hotel breakfasts and boring presentations. I nodded, made jokes, even reached across the table to touch his hand. But inside, I was somewhere else. Somewhere between shame and something terrifyingly close to relief. That night, Mark reached for me in bed. It wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of either. Just a soft touch at my waist, the kind of half-hearted gesture that said, "I remember we used to do this." I let him. I closed my eyes, willing myself to be present, to want it, to feel something. But I didn't. Not when his hands fumbled beneath my shirt. Not when he kissed my shoulder. Not even when we finally connected. Bodies moving together in a rhythm that felt more habitual than hungry. I kept thinking of Aaron, of how he had touched me like I was his, like every inch of me was worth discovering again. The contrast was unbearable. Mark felt distant, like a memory, like someone I used to love a lifetime ago. Afterward, Mark rolled over, already half asleep. I stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears I didn't understand. I had crossed a line, torn something apart that couldn't be mended with kindness or time. And yet, here was the brutal truth I couldn't escape. I didn't miss the woman I had been before Aaron. The quiet wife. The good girl. The one who smiled through loneliness and swallowed her needs like pills with no water. That woman had been dying slowly every single day, and I hadn't even noticed. Aaron had brought her back to life. That was the hardest part. Not the betrayal. Not the guilt. Not even the lying. It was knowing how alive I had felt in his arms, and how dead I felt back in my husband's. I hated myself for that. But I couldn't unknow it. Couldn't unfeel it. For the first time in years, I had felt wanted, desired in a way that stripped me bare and made me feel powerful. And now, every moment with Mark felt like acting, like reciting lines from a play we both forgot the meaning of. Over the next few days, I functioned. I smiled, made dinner, did the laundry. I responded to emails. I watched TV beside my husband and laughed at the right moments. But underneath it all, I was unraveling. I started to avoid mirrors. I couldn't look at myself without seeing her, the version of me who had surrendered to desire and didn't. Stop it. The version who had moaned another man's name with no apology in her breath. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my best friend. Not even the journal I used to pour everything into. I was too afraid that writing it down would make it more real. But it was real. Every heartbeat of it. I lived inside that silence day after day, with Aaron's voice echoing in the corners of my mind. Sometimes I wanted to call him, to see him, to do it again. Other times I wanted to pretend none of it ever happened. But I couldn't go back to who I was before. I had tasted something raw, honest, and dangerous. And I didn't know how to unlive it. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since that night with Aaron. 3 weeks of pretending. 3 weeks of playing the good wife, the steady woman, the one who never strays. And every single day, I've felt like I'm living someone else's life, smiling at dinner parties, kissing Mark goodnight, folding laundry like nothing's broken inside me. I haven't seen Aaron since, but he's still everywhere. In the music I can't listen to anymore. In the way my body remembers the shape of his hands without permission. In the dreams that wake me up breathless and aching. guilt pooling in my stomach like spoiled milk. And yet, here's the truth. I don't regret what we did. I regret what it means, because now I know. I know I'm capable of betrayal. I know I can lie with a steady voice. I know I can burn something sacred and not even flinch. But I also know something else. I know what it feels like to be seen, to be wanted, to be awake. I can't unknow that. Last night, Mark came home late. He had flowers in one hand and a tired smile on his face. "Thought you could use a little cheering up," he said, kissing my temple. And I looked at him, this man who has been nothing but loyal, kind, and good to me, and I realized something even darker than the betrayal. I'm not in love with him anymore. I haven't been for a long time. I loved the idea of us, the safety, the story we told. But that story is over now, and I'm still here, clinging to the ruins like they're worth rebuilding. I haven't told him. I don't know if I ever will. Because leaving would make me the villain. Staying makes me a liar. And I don't know which is worse. Aaron hasn't called. He hasn't texted. And part of me is glad. Because if he did, I don't know what I'd do. I'm afraid I'd fall back into him like gravity. And I don't know if I could stop myself a second time. So here I am, caught between a life I no longer want and a man I can't have. Sitting in the kitchen at 2 a.m., barefoot on cold tile, writing these words on a torn piece of notebook paper because saying them out loud would make them too real. This is the truth I'll never speak. I cheated. I felt alive. And I don't know if that makes me a monster or just a woman who finally woke up. Either way, this is a secret I'll carry to my grave. And no one, not anyone, can ever know. Not even him.